I'm going to teach you how to do the turn through the gap method. So first off, I have my exterior inside out and my lining right side out. You can tell that with the divider it doesn't quite perfectly turn, but as long as the tops are matched together, it should be fine. I tend to match corners first. Now this is the size medium, and I probably can turn it in between this gap and get it to work, but it will be a little bit of a struggle. So I'm actually going to move these pins down a little bit, and I'm going to make this a little wider, and so I make my hole a little bit bigger. And I'm going to clip the side edges. Make sure these seams match up. Okay. So if you're doing the large or the extra large, try to keep it between on this top straight part. If you're doing the small or the medium, you might want to go past this straight part. And that's why I sewed this guideline, because I will need that on the next step. Okay, I'm going to start this part over now that I have my video pointed at the right thing. I'm starting, and I can use my stitch line as a guide. Of course, my stitch line is black, and currently I'm sewing with white, so you might not be able to see my stitches, but they follow this black stitch line. And at corners I pivot. And then at the side seam, I pivot. And I'm going to stop just before I get to this corner, back stitch. Okay, now I'm going to do a couple of important things. First, at this side seam, I'm going to cut straight down, and I actually like to cut these seams separately. If my exterior, my lining seams went in different directions, or went, I just like to try to reduce the bulk when I'm going to turn it, so I cut those separately, and if the seams went in different directions, I cut on different sides of the seams. That might be too confusing. So right here, my seam goes that way, so I'm going to cut it right here, but this one down here, I'm going to cut it on the other side. It's not an exact science. Okay, and then I am going to, the places that I have stitched, I'm going to trim the seams shorter. And this part is important for getting these corners right. So right here at this corner, I'm going to cut to my stitch line, and on this side as well. I forgot to sew a stitch line on the inside, so I will just eyeball it. Try to make it the same length as the exterior stitch, exterior snip. And that'll help me know where the corner is when I turn it. Okay, I'm now going to adjust my camera and then turn it right side out. Okay. Of course, now I'm wishing I had made my gap just a little bigger with all this foam. But as this goes, it's not as bad as some other bags. Ah! Okay, my tripod keeps falling when I try to angle it this way. I've stuck my slipper on it, so hopefully it will not fall on me again. And I poke out these bottom corners. On this side too, and admire how well you did your sides if you're me. Okay, and on the inside, I'm making sure that the foam is in place, because when we top stitch, we want to make sure that we sew the foam. So we want to make sure all the edges are up, and that the lining ends up inside the foam. I have ended up with the foam on both sides of the foam on one side of the lining. So just make sure everything's in place. As you get things into place, make sure you push every corner in. Now there's enough room whether you used foam or Decovil, but with foam you might have to push it harder into place a little bit because the foam is thicker. However, it will fit. Okay, and as I get it into place, I start finger pressing this area. If you need to get a point turner to turn a corner out, go ahead and do that. I want to make sure this corner, I don't think I need my point turner, but I am using my fingernail on that one. Now I've got to get this back into place. It's worth the time to take to push everything into place. I don't know about you, but I'm always positive that it's not going to turn out right till I get to this step and I'm like, oh, yay, it all worked. Even on my own patterns, I think that. Okay, so now I am going to use clips all the way around. Okay, and at this part where you have this, it tells you where to turn it in. You turn it in at the stitch line. Sometimes I usually turn the exterior in first because it goes right over the foam. And then I turn in my lining to match. You want it to be clear where your corners are. That'll make it a lot easier to get it into the frame. Okay, so now everything is ready to be top stitched now. So now we're going to top stitch all the way around the edge, and we want to make sure we catch the foam in it. I usually do about 3/16. I like to do a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch when I'm going around. I do about 3/16. You can do 1/4, but then you run the risk of it maybe showing underneath the frame. So I don't do it too far, but you still need to catch the foam. So it's a balancing act. If I'm doing a sew-in purse, this seam will show on the inside because the sew-in frame is a little shorter on the inside of the frame than the outside. Otherwise, this seam will not show. Well, I'll change that a little. It'll show on this corner because that corner part will not be caught in the frame. I also lengthened my stitches for this part because this is a lot of thickness to go through. When I get to the side, I pivot and sew up. And I pivot at each corner. These are fairly obtuse angles for this purse, so you have to really make it clear this is the corner, and that'll make it easier to sew in. Or sorry, easier to glue into the frame because you'll know where the corner is. Okay, so I am all done. I'm ready to sew it into the frame and work on the strap. But the main part of my purse is completely sewn. So I like to just keep pushing everything into place, make sure it fits, everything looks right, and it does. And we're done.